Association, American Graduate School, Communication Council,
Here.
Education Council,
Here.
Fine Arts Council, Graduate Business Council, Graduate Engineering Council,
Here.
Graduate Public Affairs Council, Liberal Arts Council, National Professional Accounting Council, Natural Sciences Council, Pharmacy Council,
Here.
Social Work Council,
Here.
Student Association for the School of Information, Student Bar Association, Student Engineering Council, Undergraduate Architecture Student Council, Undergraduate Business Council, Undergraduate Theological Society, Youth and Nursing Student Association, Undergraduate Studies Council.
All right, we're now going to move on to organizational announcements. With Alex Jones, please come forward for the students for Margaret C. Berry Student Activity Center.
I know you've heard, but this week we heard back from President Powers, and the atrium of the Student Activity Center will be renamed for Margaret C. Berry on April 13th. Everyone's invited to the ceremony, of course, at noon, April 13th. So this will, well, technically not this room, but from Starbucks all the way down to the food court will be Margaret C. Berry. So.
Bobby requested to come a little bit earlier so he didn't have to sit through the whole election code. So Bobby Jenkins from Undergraduate Research.
I'm sure your election code is amusing, but I'm not that interested in it. We have journal stuff to take care of. Know that we are working very hard at producing this year's undergraduate research journal. We have received 30 plus submissions so far, and it's not anywhere near our deadline. We sent out the campus-wide email probably midway last semester. But again, before the break, we had a lot of eager students go ahead and submit papers, which is great. I've started looking at them so far because I don't sit on the selection committee, so I get to read them beforehand and just kind of get in my mind what my other editors will be seeing in the selection committee. But we have great articles so far, and I still encourage you to tell people in your college to submit. Expect further outreach from our communications director back there. And we'll be sending out emails to you to spread to as many student orgs in your colleges as possible. Our deadline is set right now tentatively for the end of February. However, we're probably going to be moving that to the beginning of March just to give people time to put some finishing touches on their research. And yeah, so we're still also in the process of sending out full collections to the libraries that have requested to acquisition our full collection of our journal. And with that said, we're looking to also raise our submissions to 150 submissions this year, which is 3 times the amount we typically get. But I think we can do that considering last year we doubled. This year, I mean, we're already at 30, so that's what we typically got in the past, or 30 to 50-ish. So I think we can get to that 150 this year if we try hard and encourage your students that are doing undergraduate research in your colleges to keep. Okay, good luck with that election.
President from Texas Union Leadership Weekend.
Hey everyone, how you doing? Well, I hope that you all got your homework done when the internet was down yesterday. So I'm going to talk about the Texas Union Leadership Weekend, which was put on by the Student Event Center of the Texas Union. It's a free 3-day retreat weekend, and we're focusing on first and second year students. So if you're first and second year, please go ahead and apply. We will facilitate a series of team building games, leadership skills. So if you want to learn more so you can use those skills and apply to your organizations, it's definitely a good opportunity. And I went last year and I met a lot of new people, and I learned a lot of things about myself and other people. And like I say, it's free, and the food is not pizza because it's like 4-star hotel quality food. So it's amazing. And the application is on the website of the Texas Union Student Event Center, utscc.org. So, and it's due on January 31st. So, and I have a couple of flyers with me. So, if you want more information, please come up and talk to me at the end of the meeting. So, any questions? All right, thank you.
Are there any additional organizational announcements? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the special report. There is not one tonight in the interest of time, so we're going to move on to regular guests. Is Manny Gonzalez here this evening from Graduate Student Assembly? Danny.
It's been a while. I apologize for being MIA toward the end of the semester, last semester. Things got hectic in grad school, but should be here without any issues the rest of this year. Big things that have happened since last year, or since I last gave you an update. I was elected policy director for our student advocates for graduate education, so I will be leading lobbying efforts in Congress for University of Michigan and UT, and directly all the schools that I've kind of rambled on about in previous meetings. So if you're interested in getting involved, I'm always looking for help. And if you're interested in grad school, I can always talk to you about that one flew over SG's heads. Yeah, so actually a couple of good things have happened over break. For those of you who haven't heard, Dean Victoria Rodriguez is stepping down as Dean of the Graduate School. Effective as of the beginning of next month in February, we'll have Dean Julie Lenoir. She's currently in the Vice Provost's office, and she's very big student advocate. She's worked on a number of items such as faculty grievances to the Gender Equity Climate Survey, and so we're really eager to have her on board, but at the same time it's going to be really hard saying goodbye to Dean Rodriguez, although she is continuing as a faculty member in the LBJ school, and so for those of you who are in the LBJ program or looking for grad school, you can always see her there. And I guess those are the big, and then of course we're going through an internal reform, and we should be finishing up with that by the end of the month. So good luck with the election code. It's an exciting process. Take care.
Representative of the student government present. All right, we're going to move on to unfinished business. Seeing none, we're going to move on to new business. Would the authors of SB 1104 please come forward to present the election? So, as you see, there is a bill attached with a rather lengthy code behind it. I'll skim over the bill since that's obviously not the important part, and the 11-page document following it is. Basically, this is the election code that we're presenting. The Senate previously has only had a couple bullet points in its constitution stating how elections should be run, and so this is the hope that Senate elections continue to be contested, and therefore we have regulations on them. Just to make it clear, if it does pass, and whenever form we pass it in, that it will be binding on all elections from this year until there is no more election code, which is hopefully never. So I'm going to let Stephen start with presenting the actual election code.
Okay, I'm going to start off just by going over a few of the general provisions and definitions, things that will be key given the rest of the code stuff. So Article 1.01, Chapter 1, something to look out for. Two things the code's actually going to do. It's going to monitor general elections within the Senate or College Councils, and it's also going to apply to any elections sponsored by the Senate or College Councils. Down to 1.03, candidates within the general elections for the Senate and College Councils will be responsible themselves for maintaining strict compliance with the code itself, though they will be monitored by the election committee. And last thing, under 1.06 for general provisions, the Senate election code shall become effective immediately after its passage in the General Assembly, something to be aware of. And with all other documents, extraneous decisions, or any other rulings in the past, the election code here will be the go-to document to look to. It will supersede everything else. Now on to definitions. You can skip over to 2.1.4. Just key phrases, key things you need to look out for. Election committee, or the EC, refers to the election committee established by the Senate College Council's code. That's going to be the committee itself is going to actually enforce this code and be monitoring the general elections. And then the appellate court right below that will deal with infractions, sanctions, and the appeals itself. Going down to 2.1.10, the advisory opinion refers to the actual opinions or initiatives, I guess, the election committee themselves will be handing out. And then regulatory bodies there, the election board, the appellate court, and the administrative bodies of the election process. And the last thing within the definitions is the members of the Senate's General Assembly include the at-larges themselves, leadership team, council presidents, council financial directors, and council Senate representatives.
Picking up with chapter 3, this chapter addresses the composition of the committee and how tiering procedures will work. This chapter is quite extensive and there's a lot of logistics, so I'm going to go over just some of the general principles. Looking at section 3.1.2, the election committee is a sanctioned institution of the Senator College Council, so it has official authority to deal with all matters regulating and running elections. As far as how the council itself works, no member of the election committee can participate in the elections, but any individual who is on the committee who wishes to participate has to abdicate, of course, their position before they run. The election committee will comprise exactly one representative from every college council, and these members have to be non-voting members of Senate General Assembly, so not a president, a Senate representative, or a financial director. And these representatives can be appointed by the council according to the council's constitution by whatever mechanism each council chooses. The committee will choose a chair that will serve really in a administrative capacity. They still get their vote and it's chosen internally within the committee. And in addition to those 20 members, the president of Senate, the vice president, and the policy director will serve as ex officio members that will serve to just advise, and they don't get a vote on any, they don't get to vote on any committee business. Skipping down to section 3.2, jurisdiction, authority, and limitations. This section outlines everything that the election committee is and is not responsible for. The election committee will have jurisdiction regarding all violations of the election code, which are listed later through chapter 4. And skipping to section 3.2.3, the election committee will exercise this authority by a simple majority of all its voting members, and there is a quorum that restricts that in the next section. I want to next skip down to section 3.2.9 down the page. The election committee has the authority to adjudicate any alleged violations of the election code by holding a public hearing. And I'll go through that in more detail in the next section. Skipping ahead to section 3.2.12 on the next page. If the election committee finds that a violation has been made, they have the authority to, 1, deny the candidate the right to campaign for a specific period of time, and 2, to disqualify that candidate from the election depending on how serious the violation is. And then finally, the election committee has to publicly certify the election. So the election can't be official until the election committee has determined that it was fair and has approved it. And one other thing I want to draw your attention to is in section 3.2.16, the General Assembly has the authority by the normal voting procedure to nullify any election in which the election committee itself has violated any provisions of this section. So if it's overstepped its authority or has done procedure incorrectly, if the General Assembly determines that that is egregious enough that the elections are not valid, they have the authority to nullify them. And just skipping to section 3.3, the hearing procedures, there's a lot of logistics in this section that I'll skip over, but just a few things. Any student can register a complaint with the election committee over a candidate, and within the procedure, all parties have the authority to authorize an agent to speak on their behalf and to represent them before the election committee. The election committee can determine the format of the hearing, but that is limited to certain things they can and can't do that are laid out in sections 3.3.16 through 20, and I'm just going to skip over those for now. The election committee also has the authority to make an official ruling that confirms the existence of a violation if that is in fact the case, and then they can impose whatever sanction is appropriate under the code. And then any party can appeal the ruling of the election committee to the appellate court, and really the appellate court consists of an unbiased third party that will consider the appeal, and that appellate court has to make a ruling within a certain amount of time as decided by the election committee to make sure that the Senate meets its timeline for the election process. In section 3.5, this is different classes of violations. The election committee can determine that that a violation has occurred but no sanction will be implemented because it wasn't severe enough, that a candidate will be prohibited from participating in certain activities for campaigning, or that they will be expelled.
And lastly, we have Chapter 4, which describes candidates' rights and duties. I'm going to take you through that. Sections 4.11 through 4.13 just describe that nominations take place at the General Assembly 2 weeks prior to the election. Candidates are prohibited from associating with any other candidates and cannot receive endorsements from any other candidates. Sections 4.14 through 4.16 talk about how eligible candidates include only those who are members of Senate's Assembly the year in which the election is held. And candidates may communicate with councils only after nominations have closed at the end of the General Assembly in which nominations have taken place. And then the last part of that subchapter says that all pertinent campaign information will be published online by the election committee. Candidates are expected to adhere to the code during the entire election process, and any withdrawal that needs to be made has to be made 5 days prior to the election day. Subchapter B takes you through the campaign provisions and procedures. Sections 4.2.1 through 4.2.4 describe that campaigning will only be allowed until the nomination period closes, and any materials used must be filed with the election committee and, of course, comply with university regulations that govern electronic media usage. Sections 4.2.5 through 4.2.8 they say that no harassment of others' campaign materials allowed, no misleading information or damaging other campaign activities, and of course endorsements are not allowed. And then the last part of that subchapter, university resources or any resources of mass communication, so social media pages, listservs, and whatnot, cannot be used without any written consent from the election committee, and materials must be written. And lastly, EC members may not, or election committee members may not officially support or campaign for a candidate. Subchapter C describes the election timetable and procedures and guidelines. The first section just says when the elections will take place at the last General Assembly of February. The next section, nominations for officer positions will occur during the GA that's directly preceding the election day meeting. And then the last section of that subchapter just says that leadership transitions will occur at that first GA in April. The next subchapter, the first section just says anyone from Senate's GA can nominate a candidate. The next two sections, nominations must receive a second from a different member of the Assembly and then must occur obviously within the GA. And then the last two sections describe that candidates can only be nominated at the GA in which the nominations occur, and then they can only run for the position in which they've been nominated. And finally, the last subchapter of Chapter 4 describes election procedures. And the first four sections say that all college councils will be allowed to cast a vote. Candidates can't exchange anything of value for a guaranteed vote. Candidates have 5 minutes to present, followed by 3 minutes. And in the event of a tie, the outgoing president will make the final decision. The next three sections, should a candidate lose at a certain position, they can drop down to the next one. Any candidate information, voting procedure will be on the ballots. Only councils who are here at the General Assembly may vote, and the vote counting will be done by the election committee. And finally, the last two sections of subchapter E, every council has one vote, and the way that the voting distribution power will, or the way that the voting power will be distributed is that the FD, the president, and the vice president will have 60%, and the general membership of your council has 40%. And then, of course, any complaints or allegations of fraud should be reported to the Dean of Students with consultation from the election committee.
All right, we'll now open to question and answer period. Are there any questions?
Yeah, just in the very last part about how each council vote is broken up. First is just an ignorance question on my part. Has it always been like that, or how has it worked from each council vote in the past?
So that actually varies. Sometimes it was just the president that just decided I want this candidate to win, so they vote for them. Sometimes the 3 representatives in our assembly would be like, okay, we want this person to win. And last year, since it was contested, obviously it was a little differently. Some councils let their entire council vote, then they would decide. And I know that we got this from an adaptation actually what Business did last year. We decided that since the 3 representatives sit in the assembly and come to all the meetings with probably people that will be running or know the people that will be running, they'll know them best, they'll know what they've done, so they get the majority of the vote, but the council members are allowed to lobby them, any 3 of them, to change their vote if they feel really strongly about a certain candidate. And obviously, if 2 feel one way and the other feels the other way after 3, the majority win. And then the general council is 40. And however you want to administer the vote amongst your general council, obviously, that's up for y'all to decide.
So in section 351, where it talks about evaluations of voters should be divided into 4
Thank you.
For being able to drop down in the election, does that require a nomination, or do you just choose to lose?
So the way it would work, say if someone was running for president and didn't win, then whoever was monitoring the elections, I'm assuming it was someone from the election committee, or if a person that just wants to preside over the elections, like dictating them, it's up to them. But they would ask them, would you like to drop down to the next race? They would have to be renominated since they've already been nominated to run for one position, but if they choose to drop down, so say if you're running for president, you drop down to VP, and if you're running for VP to FD, etc. So it just works by you saying yes or no, do you like to drop down in the race? It wouldn't require renomination.
That's like the very first page, and it says that this applies to all the elections that Senate sponsors. Well, some of those.
I mean, we don't sponsor any elections currently, but if that ever does happen, it would dictate over them as well. But right now, it's kind of inapplicable. It's a, yeah.
So with 3.1.5 and 3.1.3, if the president, vice president, or financial director wanted to sit on the election committee, would that just void their right to vote in the general election, or are they not allowed to vote in the election committee?
So the way that we actually came up with this is I would be compelled to say they wouldn't be allowed to sit on the election committee because we're trying to make the people who rule over the elections as unbiased as possible. Like I said, obviously the 3 representatives probably have the most interaction with the candidates that would be running. So technically, and it's just another way to get members from councils more involved that don't get to come to our general assemblies every Thursday. So technically the 3 representatives would be disqualified from being a member of the election committee.
In 3.5.1, how are the classes of violations defined?
That actually will be up to the election committee to decide because we all realize it would kind of be nebulous to sit here and say, okay, so this is like least serious and the next serious. That would be hard to define. So when the election committee would hear, when they would hold the hearing, they decide based on the consensus of the members of the committee, like what class they think it falls into, like how egregious what they committed was.
Okay.
Because it's kind of hard to define. Mindy, I saw her name.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Mindy Sutton, Deputy Advisor for Senate, for those of you who may not know me. And maybe it's in here somewhere, but does it stipulate how many votes each council gets?
Yes, each council only gets 1 vote.
And is that in here?
Yeah, it's in chapter 4. I don't know if I can see it.
Let me find the exact number. I think it might actually be the very end. Yes, each council shall receive 1 vote.
Where is that?
On 4.5.9, it's right above the breakdown of the percentages.
Okay. So they will have made that decision about how they're voting before they get to the meeting.
Yes.
That percentage decision.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
First thing I forgot to say earlier was thank you to Cecil. It was easy. And second thing is, I like that all the councils having a voice on the election committee for equality's sake, but I think a committee of 20 seems a little not fun
Yes.
to deal with for me.
And
I don't know if anyone else.
yeah, and we've all, all of us have been debating this amongst ourselves because it's toss up, and we decided to leave it up to our General Assembly to decide. We decided the most fair way, obviously, is to open it up to every single council member. Well, 20 is a lot. It's a way to have everyone's voice. But if y'all decide that you would like another way, because an election committee of 20 is a lot to deal with, then we are open to that part of ending. We just didn't want to sit here and tell you that only a certain amount of councils can be on it. So if that's something y'all decide to change, we can take it back to your councils. We'll be more than happy to hear it, because that has been a point of contention amongst all of us while we've been writing this. So.
For a few questions, 3.1.10, it says President and Vice President and also Director will sit as ex officio members, yet it allows for witnesses to call that in. So would they necessarily need to sit on that committee, or can they just be called as witnesses? Because I feel like that gives a little bit undue influence to people running internally for the exec board than maybe people running for council.
Yeah, they wouldn't technically sit on the committee. As an ex officio member, they would just be called for their opinion if it was needed.
3.21, just a wording change. It says regarding all violations, that's an assumption of guilt, accusations. What might be a better word?
Okay.
3.2.4, 1/4 for quorum. Seems that 5 people to fill it. And then, is there a burden of proof established for accusations to be ruled upon?
There is.
As far as how Puerto goes, while Josh is looking, the only reason we decided that is because we realized 20 is a lot, and it might be already 20 members. Once again, the composition of the committee changes, then we will be actually changing what meets quorum as well.
Look at section 3.3.22. The election code shall base its ruling on the preponderance of the evidence and shall use the voting procedure.
Rather than clear and convincing preponderance of it? That's all I have.
All right, seeing none, take us back to your councils. We'll now move on to SR 1111 with the authors please come forward for calling for university policy to assist in reducing course material costs.
Okay, so basically what this was textbook ad hoc tried to address the fact that textbooks and course materials seem to be a little expensive and try to combat that with some changes. Next slide. The Texas legislature last session tried to address this by passing HB 33, which requires that professors submit their book list 30 days before moving to class. The problem with that is 30 days is still a rather short amount of time, and then there's a little bit of evidence that textbook costs since 1986 have risen 186%. The only two things in the United States economy that have risen at that rate, according to GAO, is medical costs and textbooks tuition. So, considering all those are big legislative issues, this is definitely something worth addressing. Right now, the reason a lot of textbooks cost what they do is because we, at the University Co-op, do not get a list of textbooks within a decent amount of time, which means we can submit them the day of. We're not able to order used textbooks, stuff like that, or we have to order all brand new, which of course is difficult. And if we get them months ahead of time, we're able to reduce cost buying in bulk and, of course, buying used. And this just shows a little bit of in the United States, textbooks have much higher costs because we don't have any used forms. So although the Texas legislature as well as the federal government passed rules for 30 days before classes, that's something that applies universally to all colleges. So we will have to be making these changes in the next few months. We're just asking for a little bit more. And what that would be is not 30 days before class starts, but the day of registration. So when you're registering for classes, say you're registering for advertising 301, and there's 4 different professors, you can see maybe this professor has 1 book, this one has 5, all these sort of things, which can help you reduce costs in your college career. So with that, a few of the things we're going over, if you see us, whereas on line 49, this is an example that the co-op has done. The rhetoric department has done this for 306. They standardize the course materials for a 3-year period, which means that they guarantee that they will be using that same book for 3 years. In doing so, the University Co-op is able, and all vendors within the area are able to note that this book will be used, and a lot of people will be demanding it. With that, we've been able to bring the cost from $45.80 for a new book down to $34.35 used, and after buybacks, the class only costs you $11.35 with a 3-year guarantee, which is about the cost. So if we can move this towards all classes, large introductory classes can be reduced by 75% in terms of cost. It's simply a master planning type of thing, and making sure the professors are sending these books these lists earlier so that everybody is able to buy them earlier, students are more informed, that sort of stuff. Just some central planning. So that's about it. That was the rhetoric department's comparison and examples. To achieve these goals, we have our resolve statements. As I said, the federal and state governments have passed this, making it 30 days. We're asking that 2 additional questions be asked, brought up in course instructor surveys to see how you felt about course materials. Sometimes professors might adopt a book that they wrote because they make a little bit of money off of it. It might not be the best book for the specific subject, or there might be 10 of them, and that's just not appropriate, in my opinion. So compliance, we have down for tenure and raise decisions, department heads. One of the major problems is when grad students are teaching courses, they pick the newest book, and they honestly don't get chosen to teach a class until the last few days. So we get those within 2 days before class starts, and we need 300 books. Of course, that's a very costly endeavor, and instead of, we're asking the department heads pick those books, and when they pick those books, we can get them in a lot sooner, all that sort of stuff. So, and then courses the same number when possible, get the same course materials. If you're taking Advertising 301 or the History of Shakespeare, maybe all the History of Shakespeare can have the same book, where right now they don't. So, something to think about? Any questions, concerns?
I have a comment regarding the department heads picking the course materials. They may not necessarily be an expert on the field. So when you are making a professor pick a book on something that they are not really experts in, that might be a little bit problematic.
Sure.
And I interfere with the professor who's actually teaching the course, especially for graduate classes. They are very specific. So that might be an issue.
One of the things we run into is the fact that grad students never teach courses that have never been taught before. At least that's the precedent that seems to be set, which means there is a precedent for what book would be used for that specific class. So I would assume that they would go on what that recommendation was from the year prior. And it does leave room for the book being changed if necessary, but the fact is department heads would have to make those decisions 30 days before class starts because by federal and state law, they have to make those decisions. We can't not submit a book.
So maybe you can modify a little bit by saying that the course instructor or the professor who's actually teaching the class comes up with the book, submits the names of the books to the department chair 30 days prior, maybe.
Right. Right now, they just submit them directly to the co-op, and the co-op compiles that list. So if there is a professor chosen, then that's what happens. The unfortunate part is sometimes you register for classes where there's not a professor until the first day. And that's definitely a problem, and we think in those cases, and usually it's large introductory classes where there's a precedent set, but I'm open to any amendments that you have for that, so.
What happens for campus classes? Is there like something that the co-op would do because you're asking them to turn their requests so early? And I had several classes this semester, and I'm just like wondering how much money they felt like those books.
Right. That is something that's challenging, but we do list the number of students enrolled, so we do have some sort of idea. I think it's below 20 in the expectation, or the room size is 100. We don't overcome because those size is going to be canceled. But largely, this would reduce a lot of costs.
I'm just curious about the inclusion of tenure and raise decisions. I understand it is an enforcement mechanism, but I don't see the direct tie possible.
Right, and that was just being very specific and explicit in what we were wanting. When we would have this added to institutional / university policy, it would become a part of tenure and raise decisions because from what I understand, if you don't comply with university policy, you're not going to be put on a tenure track.
I just think it's a little much to enumerate that because I think that's kind of understood. You have to be in line with university policy.
I'm fine with striking it.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, take this back to your council. Just a quick reminder that we have a meeting next week as well. I know we usually don't have 2 in a row, but that's just the election code can be passed before nominations begin at 7:08. So do try to take all of this back and get as much feedback as you possibly can before next week. I know that's a pretty short turnaround, so I apologize. We're going to now move on to agency reports. I see Jordan Humphreys here from Gentex.
Hello, everyone. Dentex. Hopefully you've been hearing some updates from Jeff or Carissa or somebody up here. I've had causes of conflict in the last semester. But I just want to let y'all know a few things that Dentex has been doing in the last semester. Basically, just for a quick overview for anyone who hasn't heard, Dentex is the program that allows students to create and lead their own discussion-based courses. So we've had classes in everything from our jobs, what is it? Will you recite the title for me?
Power, Ethics, and Destiny in Lost.
The TV show. We had one on the postmodern city. Shabab, who was last year, did a class on college athletics and society last semester, and I did one on communication and multiplayer video games. So it just allows students to explore interests in a very different way, and in the last semester we've had an increase in applicants and a lot of positive feedback from the School of Undergraduate Studies. Students can now receive undergraduate research credit. I received it in my major for creating my class. So it's just something it's kind of on a roll, and we have 2 new classes for the next semester. You can hit the next slide. And I'm doing another one. Mine was so successful that I decided to focus more on video game design. So it is innovative video game design. It is going to look at games for good. There are professors at the university that are looking at how to help autistic children express themselves, how to help elderly people use technology to make better healthcare decisions, and there's another professor trying to study how people can form meaningful relationships in virtual environments. And so we're going to bring all of those people in, use the principles of game design, and try to act as consultants for those people to help make their games as successful as possible to their target audience. So if that is of any interest to you, you can still register for the class. You can just email down there. My class is Mondays from 12 to 1. And Paula's class is Social Dynamics and Seinfeld. He'll be looking at, as Paula put it, Jerry's neuroticism, and Kramer's Kramerness, George's selfishness, and just trying to use psychology, developmental biology, and all sorts of different interdisciplinary research to take a look at why the people in the show act the way that they do. So his class is going to be Wednesdays from 5 to 6. If you're interested in any of those, just shoot me an email with your EID, or if anyone in your councils or any of your friends or roommates or whoever is interested, let them know. And next, if you have been inspired by the last minute and a half or however long, you can also teach a Dentex class. Applications are due on the 31st, and it's really a pretty short proposal, just kind of outlining objectives and kind of what you want your course to cover. You can find that at dentex.org. So if you have even just a little inkling that, maybe you want to do a class on, you can do TV shows, you can do your hobbies, or whatever your favorite interest is in an academic way, just shoot me an email. If you need any other information about it, feel free to email that utdentex.org or utdentex@gmail.com, sorry. So yeah, that's due January 31st, and I'm going to put on another hat real quick because the Archer program just emailed me this afternoon, and they wanted me to remind you all that the deadline to apply to Archer is February 17th. So they will be having a one last info session and application held out on January 26th from 11 to 5. I'll email you all the info on that so you can put it in the newsletter. But I would very highly recommend getting started on that now. I know when I was applying, it was, I don't know, I'd heard how stressful and strenuous and all of that it would be, and it lived up to the hype. So good luck to everyone who's applying. Thank you all very much.
Are there any additional agency reports for this evening? All right, seeing none, we're going to drop on down to council announcements. Do any councils have have any announcements. Events coming up. Exciting things happening in your colleges. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move down to executive reports. I have 5 points. The first is Invest in Texas. We'll be having a meeting on February 5th. I'll be sending out over the listserv the time for that. Invest in Texas is back in action, and we're really working on developing a platform for future years. We've met with Representative Branch as well as Representative Isaac to sort of discuss the voter ID provisions and how that influences students. We were elated Representative Branch's office agreed to take that on as one of their legislative initiatives in session, so we're excited that we have a champion for that in the Texas legislature. So we'll be working on that issue and similar issues. One of the things that's coming up is the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board is up for review based on sunset provisions. So we'll be taking a really close look at some of the things that they're doing and how it influences and impacts students on campus. All of y'all probably remember when Dr. Abram came up to talk about the core curriculum changes that the coordinating board proposed. So things that they do really are impactful to things that we do here on campus and really influence students and the types of curriculum that we have here. So we'll be looking and doing a lot of research on that. So if that's of interest to you, please let me know. And then very quickly, the third thing that we're working on in Invest in Texas is developing partnerships and strategic relationships with schools all across the state of Texas, so Texas State University, University of North Texas, University of Houston, in order to perhaps have one big lobby day in addition to the UT Austin lobby day. So really, and things that we find similarities, such as funding higher education, all getting together and working on that. So if you're interested in that initiative in particular as well, feel free to shoot me an email. And just 4 quick, brief updates. The MyEDU Campus Committee has been formed. We have not met yet. I'll be sure to keep you abreast of all of the issues that are going on there. But Natalie Butler and I will sit on that committee representing students. So I'll be sure that all of y'all's voices are heard as well, and we'll discuss that in presidents as well as future General Assembly meetings. The third thing is the presidentially appointed task force on student judicial services has been assembled. They have not yet met. So Senate and President Powers jointly appointed a task force to look at student opinion regarding the student judicial service process and how to get students more engaged in that process. Since currently it is pretty nebulous to students, they don't really know what's going on. It's an intimidating process. So we'll be working with the President's office to sort of establish that task force, and they should be meeting in the next few weeks, so that's very exciting. The fourth thing is the CTBAC roundtable meetings will commence again next Thursday at 5 p.m. We'll be discussing budgeting and specifically student engagement in the Dean's DPAC proposal. So if you have any questions about that and you're a CTBAC leader, just let me know. And then the very last thing, I know we've had lots of engaging conversations, especially in presidents, about career services. We're creating a university stakeholders type meeting with different representatives from different career service offices, people from the provost office, people from the president's office, as well as students. So I'll keep you informed about how that's going. I'm supposed to meet with President Powers tomorrow morning to discuss the progress on that, and I haven't heard anything in a while. So I'll let you know as those conversations begin again as well. That's all on my agenda. Are there any other executive reports? Okay, we're going to move on to committee reports. I see one here from Christine and Mark from Recruitment and Retention.
Hi, I'm Christine Thompson.
And Mark Jones.
Okay, so this semester we're doing 3 Longhorn school buses, and so the dates are in the agenda. We have February 3rd, and as of right now we have Comm Council and Architecture, so we're looking for one more spot for that date.
And then the second date, which is February 17th, is completely filled up, but we do have 2 more openings on March 23rd, so if any council is interested in doing it, then please shoot us an email.
Yeah, we actually have 1 more open on February 17th. So we have 1 on the 3rd, 1 on the 17th, and then 2 on the 23rd. So let us know if you're interested. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other committee updates? Yes, Hannah.
Hannah Tucker from Outreach and Development. I just wanted to point out that we sent out our first alumni email to all of Senate alumni from the past 5 years of executive board members. We've had a lot of feedback, which is really exciting. We've never had that before. So it's a really good, it's a great year for Outreach and Development this year.
Thank you, Hannah. presidents, Senate representatives, or financial directors of your councils are interested in being involved in one of the events that they're planning for the Vice President of Student Affairs Leadership Reunion, we're doing sort of a Senate event for that, and Hannah will probably give you more details about that later on. If any of the council presidents, Senate reps, and financial directors are interested, they're also welcome to come to that as well, since I know they all interacted a lot throughout the year. So I think that is all for committee reports. Anything else? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to ad hoc updates. Are there any ad hoc updates? Okay, seeing none. We're going to move on to university-wide appointments. Have anything, any UI appointments? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to open mic. Does anyone have any open mic announcements? Yes, Mark Jones.
Sorry. So once again, I'm Mark Jones, and I'm part of an organization on campus known as Texas Blazers. We are a service, spirit, and leadership organization, and we're starting our spring recruitment. And we are accepting applications for any male student who has been at the university for at least a year. So we have 2 info sessions. The first is Tuesday, February 7th, and the second one is Thursday, February 9th, and they're at 6 p.m. And most likely they will be in Parliament Hall, but that's to be determined. And the applications will be online, and they're at texasblazers.com, and they're due February 14th at 5 p.m. Thanks.
Yes, Michael Dane.
I forgot to do this during council announcements, but UBC is hosting our faculty research presentation, next one on Tuesday at 5 in UCC 3.122, and it's with Professor John Allison, who co-wrote the 900-page business law book. Have you seen that? He's going to be talking about patent litigation and the internet. These are very fascinating professors.
Any other open mic announcements? Yes.
Parker from Architecture Council. I'm president of another organization, Global Architecture Brigades. If you're interested in designing a healthcare facility for rural Honduras, we have an info session next Tuesday at 7 in Goldsmith. You don't have to be an architecture student, so everyone's welcome. We have pizza.
Any other open mic announcements? All right. Seeing none, Princess Goers operating the meeting.
24th. Sorry. Well, but it's on 24th, like right next to Starbucks. I thought I would pick somewhere close.
Councils, if you